Is this the year that you're going to have a major breakthrough? Is it possible to know ahead of time if this is going to be a transformational year for you? If these 5 signs that we're going to be discussing today are showing up in your life, chances are you're about to have one of the best years ever. As usual, I'm joined by my co hosts, Yulia and Nate.
Hello, nice topic that you chose for today. If you all want to have the 5 signs organized in a little guide, please check the description. We've organized it all for you.
It's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to this one.
The best thing, and what's really cool about these 5 signs is that they're all connected. They fit together like layers of an onion. So you can do all of them without feeling like you're being pulled apart. One complements the other. There's a lot of noise in personal development where you are trying to do everything. And oftentimes when you're trying to do all of those things, you feel really pulled apart. And what I found is that most things that work really well when they're layered together. And so that's what these 5 signs are.
One question for you: do they have to be accomplished in order, or people can just choose which ones they want or not?
Good question. There is a bit of an order to it, and I'll discuss that because it usually takes knowing one of these things before you know another. But once you've got it down, it's a matter of just kind of revisiting and going back and forth between them.
Well, cool. Let's jump in. What's the first one?
Okay, the first one is I should say one more thing. Most of the time when you watch videos like this or you listen to podcasts like this, they say, well, you got to set a goal. You got to know what you want. And so I don't want to bore you with that. You already know that. You already know you need to know what it is that you want. So I'm going to assume that everybody knows maybe 1, 2, or maybe even 3 things that you want to accomplish in 2024. So that being said, the first step or the first piece that I want to go into, or the first sign rather, is knowing what you value and how you're going to fulfill those values. And this is what I think is missing from most people when they're talking about goal setting or when they're thinking about their goals. They are missing the point. The point is, what is fulfilling for you? What actually does fulfill you about the goal if you accomplish it? Most people have no idea. And that's why so often we go chasing goals that are not really something that we really want. We want them because we think we're supposed to want them, or a lot of people want that same goal or have that same accomplishment. So we just think, well, if everybody wants it, there must be something important about it. And then I go chasing it, and I can't even begin to list all of the things that I chased, thinking that, if I just accomplished this or just got this, then my life was going to be great. And sometimes you do succeed at that and you achieve the goal, and the fulfillment lasts for maybe an hour, or it's more relief because you spent so much time sacrificing and grinding and putting so much effort and not doing the things that you would have rather been doing just to accomplish this thing. And then you get there and you go, this is it. Like, it lasts maybe an hour or two, and there's relief, like I said, but there's not a lot of joy and there's not a lot of fulfillment. And what your high performance, high accomplishing people often do is they just jump into another goal right away because they feel purposeless without one. And they just kind of repeat that process over and over. And I've coached a lot of these people because they come to me with imposter syndrome, and they're very, very successful on paper. They've accomplished a lot, but they're not fulfilled. They're not happy because they never understood what was the value or values that they were trying to fulfill.
So I think that the step with fulfilling the value is probably easier once you know the value. You just ask yourself what makes you happy or what makes you feel that particular value. But how can people do the first part of this sign, which is understanding their values? How would you tell a person to find the values and have an easy process for that?
Next time you see a rainbow, no, I'm joking. Well, think about, okay, what it is that you want. And it's good to, have the goals grounded in, something that you can measure, right? So if it's accomplishing, like, let's say it's making a certain amount of money, or it's a job promotion, or you want to travel to 3 new countries. These are all things that a third party could verify if you had done them or not. So it's good to have something grounded in reality and that can be measured. Am I moving closer to this, or am I moving away from it, or am I sort of at a standstill? So once you know that, that's what I'm already assuming you already know about 2024. In 2024, what do you want that's different than what you had in 2023 or what you've ever had before? Okay. Ground that in reality so that, they say with smart
Does it have
goals,
to be different, or can it be just something that you've already
a
achieved,
repeat
but
ach-
maybe better, or maybe something improved, not necessarily different?
yeah, it could be the same. I think we don't get as much fulfillment if we keep repeating processes, then it becomes more habitual and it's not about stretching our potential or fulfilling a higher potential. So there's probably going to be less fulfillment in that. But if you say, okay, I had a good year based on how much income I made, I just want to have that kind of year again. Okay. I mean, there probably will be some fulfillment in that, especially better than going backwards, and
Yeah,
making less money.
exactly.
But I think if that's something that's important to you and you want to focus on it, then you probably want to do a little bit better than you did the year before. But sometimes we just have things like that where we say, yeah, I basically want the same thing that I had last year. And in that case, it's really not a goal. You can do it. You just know you just do all the same things, and you're probably going to have that. But when we're talking about goals and we're talking about like breaking through and this being your year, well, that probably means you want something that you don't already have, or you want something that you didn't have the year before.
Yeah, makes
So
sense.
I'm making some of these assumptions, and maybe they're not specifically correct for you, but then I'd be wondering, why are you listening to this? So let's assume you want something bigger and better than what you've had before. I think most people do. And that's, why we get into personal development. So you have a tangible goal, right? And then you say, okay, what will that do for me once I have it? And what usually comes out is what we call a value, which is vague. It could be, well, I want, it'll make me feel successful. Okay. Successful is vague because everybody determines that in a different way. How I feel successful, what would I have to do to feel successful? And so it's what we call a value, a generalization about an accomplishment, a generalization about an experience that's important to you. So if success is important to you, then the success experience brings you fulfillment when you succeed. And then you keep going. Well, what would success do for me? Or what's important to me about success? And you just keep extracting these values. So happiness, joy, peace, security, whatever, freedom, whatever these are. And so once you know what that is, well, you're really tapping into the motivation behind the goal. This is super important because in order to achieve a goal, you got to stay motivated to move toward it. So when you tap into your values, you're tapping into the motivation. So we always, everything we do, every decision we make, every action we take has a value driving it, something we want to fulfill. We don't do anything for no reason at all. It's always driven by wanting to fulfill an intention, and another word for intention is value. So when you know what the values are that you're wanting to fulfill by whatever accomplishment or goal you're going after, then you can put your attention on the value and realize that the goal itself isn't as important as the value, because the goal itself doesn't have any fulfillment. There's nothing contained in the goal. There's nothing contained in objects that we achieve. It's what will this do for me? And so many times where someone has come to me for coaching and they had a goal, and I elicited the values from that goal, about 50% of the time, the person realizes they didn't want that goal to begin with, because it's not, they realize once that we do the values elicitation, that goal was not going to fulfill those values for them. And this is really important because we are inundated with people, family, friends, society, culture telling us what should be important to us. And then we go out and do those things and they feel really empty, and we go, "Well, that didn't do anything. Is there something wrong with me?" And I think that's the other point about this is when you really uh, connect with those values, then that's where the motivation comes from. And it also starts to steer you in a better direction. You have more clarity about what accomplishments and what goals will actually fulfill those values. So how many times have you set a goal, didn't know what the values were driving it, and you start chasing it and you run out of motivation. And then you go, okay, I just don't have it in me anymore. And then you start beating yourself up and you call yourself lazy and you say, well, if I just had enough willpower and enough discipline, then I would be deserving of this. And if I were good enough, then I could do this, but I'm not. And then you really just beat yourself up about it. Chances are what was really happening was that there was a deeper wisdom inside of you that knew better, that said, hey, this is not going to do it for you. So we're not fully on board with this.
Do you think that's always the case?
No, not always, but
Okay.
a lot of times. I know
Okay.
in my life, I can look back on things that I accomplished and what I had to sacrifice in order to accomplish them, and just was it was absolutely not worth it because it really wasn't something that fulfilled me. I was doing it um, because people thought it was impressive, or my parents thought it was something good for me, or so many of those things. And then there have been so many of those times where I ran out of motivation for something, and I beat myself up about it and just thought it was because I wasn't good enough, or that I just didn't have it in me, didn't have the willpower, the discipline. And when I look back on that, I was like, that's absurd, because I can see clearly now that if I had achieved whatever that was, it would have not fulfilled me in the least bit. And I'll give you an example. My insurance agency, I became depressed after 2 years of basically breaking myself trying to make that agency more successful. And I became depressed because I thought I'm just not good enough.
The thing
But
is,
wait, and I hate to think, if I had been successful at that and I had made a lot of money, I had made all the money that I wanted to make, it would have been really hard to have taken the journey that I have taken, which I'm the most fulfilled I've ever been in any type of work that I've ever done. This is the most fulfilling life I've ever lived. That, or being trapped by the golden handcuffs of all that money and all that success and not being able to walk away from it. Like, I feel like I dodged a bullet.
the thing is, why I pointed this out is that I was looking back on a few things that I kind of wanted for myself and aligned with my values, but for some reason I just did not accomplish them. And it's not a matter of it would have not fulfilled me. It would have. It would
How do you
have.
know? How do you know?
So, for example, it was quite hard for me to finally get into a very good habit of going to the gym, exercising, or, for example, eating healthier. While I was still living with my parents, I just, I was waiting for my visa to move to US. So I kind of just said, you know what, I'm not gonna do anything right now. I just wait until my life changes. For example, another one, I wanted to crochet. I wanted to make a shirt for myself, something fun, fulfilling what I wanted, to relax, to learn something new. I like craft stuff, creativity, joy, peace. It would have brought all of those things to me. But for some reason, I just kind of didn't find enough time for it. And little by little, I just stopped pursuing that goal. So that's why I'm thinking there's so many times when you actually quit a goal and it's not really a matter of values in alignment. There must be something else. So I would say to people to actually look into the values before quitting a goal, to make sure that that's the reason, and it's not necessarily just being lazy. And I don't want people to think that because I'm lazy and I cannot achieve this goal, it must be what Damon is saying, which means it must not align with my values. And that's why I would say check in with that before you quit the goal. Check in to make sure that it does indeed not align with your values. And if it actually does, find out what's really stopping you.
Okay, so yeah, you're jumping to sign number 3.
I'm so sorry.
And so, just in a nutshell, what this means is that you're just a bad person. That's why. No, of course not. So the other thing too is you might be prioritizing something else over that, and you want to look at that and say, okay, is this really more important than crocheting? And then the answer you might get is, yeah, it is more important. So sometimes you have to do that. You have to prioritize. We can't do it all. And that's part of values in the hierarchy of your values. What is more important to me than this other thing? So
that's a good part, which is actually for this step. After you know what you value, it's important to make a hierarchy and kind of know which ones you should focus more. Because I would say if you end up with like 15 values because you really like doing the work and you just, you get overwhelmed because you find yourself having so many values to fulfill in order to have the year of your life, the best year ever. So I think hierarchying and choosing the top ones to fulfill definitely can bring that down and not feel so overwhelming that you only get fulfillment if you achieve all of those values. It's actually working in a different way.
Yeah, and this is where a lot of people get confused whenever they go to make a major purchase like a car or a house. They don't really think it through what's really important to them. And let's say they do. Let's say they do. They okay, I want to buy a house. I want 2 bedrooms. I want it to be, I don't know, here in Santa Cruz, that'd easily be $1 million. And so they say my budget's not is at $1 million. And then maybe you want some other things like I want it to be blue or something like that. So you kind of have this loose arrangement of the things that you want out of the house, but you don't have a priority. And so you get shown a few houses, and some of those houses fit some of those, and some of them fit other ones of those. And if you don't know what the hierarchy of each one of those elements of the house that you want, which one's more important, you're going to easily get talked into by a real estate agent buying something that's more expensive because that's what they're going to push for. The same thing goes for cars. You know, like you go to buy a car and you want it to be safe, you want it to be fuel efficient, maybe you want it to be purple with sparkles, and then maybe you do want some aspects of luxury. Well, if you don't understand the hierarchy of what's most important in those, you walk into a dealership and the dealer gets you looking at the most luxurious car that's the most expensive, and it checks that one box, but it doesn't check the other boxes. It's not fuel efficient, it's over your budget, it's all these other things. But because you don't understand this and you're not clear about it, you're more susceptible to getting talked into doing something that goes against your other values.
Mm-hmm. So I believe we definitely explored the first.
Did we beat that
really
one
well.
to death enough? Nate, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Well, I just think there's a ton of research out there about the importance of being able to prioritize, and as far as effectiveness is concerned and overall productivity. So I find it fascinating when you think about living a really great life that you can actually prioritize your values and make choices around that. So if you think about, okay, somebody who is thinking about creating the life that they've always wanted, or really leveling up in the next year, I can only imagine if they prioritize the things that would create the most fulfillment, that they could get a lot of access to a lot of what's inside, a lot of the resources within them. It's pretty cool, and that's just what was going through my mind while you all were talking. And it's yeah. What's the next one?
Well, let me just say one more thing about that too. So, like, let's say you have values like secure, like you want to, maybe it's a monetary goal,
Okay.
and you start thinking about what we're saying here, and you start saying, well, I want it for security. And then freedom pops up also, and peace of mind, so these are peace, freedom, security. But if you don't understand, and this is what a lot of people do, they think, okay, well, if it's linear, if I must experience security before I can experience freedom, then I should focus on security. And I guarantee you, if you focus on the coming year, 2024, and you focus on security versus focusing on creating more freedom in your life, you're going to have a very different year, and not one that's going to be as fulfilling. We all need a certain amount of security, but there's not much fulfillment in security once you have enough. If you keep doubling down, tripling down on more and more security, then what do? Do you hire a bodyguard? Do you hire, you install an alarm in your house? It's like you need enough of it. We all need a certain amount of security. So in the sense of money, maybe you need to make a certain amount. But if you're only focused on just reaching that threshold, and you don't focus on freedom and how to fuel your striving for your goal through freedom, security is not going to be very motivating. It's just going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I made enough. And then you kind of sit back. You're never going to reach your goal that way.
One tip, whenever you do the hierarchy of your values, think of it as which one would encompass more of the other ones. So for example, for me, I know that if I am a happy person and I experience happiness, I know that, for example, joy, peace is already included in it. So whenever you do the hierarchy, think of it, which one includes the other, and that's how you rank them. So for example, in the case of security and freedom, if you just think of it like that, if you experience freedom, however that means to you, does it mean you already have all the security that you would need? And if the answer is yes, then obviously freedom is going to be on top.
Yeah. In most cases, that's true for most people. Like, in order to experience freedom, there has to be a certain amount of security. Yeah. So it's a larger category. All right, let's move on to the next one. You guys got me talking too much about the first one. So the second sign is you have a vision for the year. And I would say a vision is more important than a goal. And I would say the majority of people I've heard talk about creating a vision get it really wrong. And what I mean by get it wrong is it's never worked for me. So, and the truth is when I talk to people about this, they often say, wow, I've never heard anyone talk about creating a vision the way that you talk about creating a vision. And then I would say, well, the other ways, have you tried them? And they'll say yes. And I'll say, did they work for you? And they'll say no. And I'll say, okay, try this way. And your success rate is going to be much, much higher if you're focused on a vision and you understand these things. You understand that a vision is supposed to be vague. It's more about a direction than a destination. Okay. And your vision, this is why I was saying that all these signs fit together very well. If you take your values, if you have a goal and you elicit the values around them and you do the hierarchy, and then you look at those values, which are going to be vague words. They're what we call nominalizations in NLP. Vague words meaning they're very open to many possibilities. So if one of your values is to be happy, there are infinite ways for you to be happy. There's not just one way, and there's just not just one goal that will get you there, and there's not just one strategy to achieve that goal that will get you there. There are many possibilities, and this is why focusing on your values is so much more important. So you focus on your values, but then you bring these values together to create an even bigger generalization, and that's your vision. So if you take those values that you've elicited from your goal and you say, okay, if I were to watch a movie of 2024 and I'm going to create that's going to be my vision is this movie, or maybe it's even like a movie preview, and I'm going to base it on all of these values. What does that look like? And if you don't get one of the most exciting movies you've ever seen or exciting movie previews that you've ever seen, go back to your values and make that more compelling. Like really use your values. Like, well, what does it look like for me in 2024 when I'm happy, when I'm at peace, when I feel like I have a tremendous amount of freedom, when I'm feeling successful and ambitious and accomplished? Like, what does that look like in 2024? And I'm just using those random values. They might not be the same as your values, but when you're able to see that, and again, it should be vague because you want to leave your vision open to many possibilities. Goals are specific. Visions are vague. It sets the direction. Your values, when you turn them into a vision, become your compass. And what's great about a compass? A compass always shows you the direction. It always shows you where north is. Now, you might not recognize the territory. You might not have a plan yet of how you're going to scale the mountains and, pass through the terrain, but you still know where the right direction is. And so all you have to do is go in that direction and figure it out as you go, and you will. And if you have a really compelling vision, what's really powerful about a vision when it becomes unconscious, then you're not negotiating with it anymore. It's unconscious, but it's still there and it's driving you and it's motivating you and it's actually kind of pulling you along. And so because it's unconscious, you're not negotiating, well, should I do this or should I do that? It's just the vision is leading you there. It's sort of lighting the way as you go. And if you have a vision for your year, 2024, and it's based on your values, which is based on what you want to accomplish, you're going to have an amazing year for sure.
So when you say unconscious, what do you mean?
Go ahead, Nate.
So when you're saying that it goes unconscious, what do you mean?
Well, we're not conscious of everything. We can only be conscious of a certain amount of things at one time. And so an example of this would be when people ask me that question, or I love it when people say, I want more willpower and more discipline, which, I have issues with because I don't want to will myself or discipline myself. I want to be clear about what I want and feel naturally motivated to do it. So when people talk to me about willpower and discipline, I'll say, well, do you brush your teeth every day? And they're like, of course. Do you brush your teeth twice a day? Yeah, of course. How long have you been doing that? As far back as I can remember. And I'll say, well, how did you have the willpower, the discipline to do that? And they were like, well, that's not really the same thing. It was like, yes, it is. That's exactly how it is. Your choice to be consistent about brushing your teeth is already settled, right? You're not negotiating this anymore. You value good breath. You value keeping your teeth. You value, oral hygiene. And so you know that you want that. That's not even a doubt or a question anymore. And so the way to do that is to consistently brush your teeth twice a day, at least, maybe even more, and floss and all those other things. But that choice has gone unconscious. You're not negotiating with yourself, gee, I wonder if I should quit brushing my teeth, or, you're not doing that. You just get up and you do it. And so when your vision is like that and it goes unconscious, you're not negotiating whether or not you should go in that direction anymore. You know it's the right direction for you, and you naturally do the things that will get you there. And again, what's good about it being vague is that you're going to run into obstacles you weren't expecting. And so you need to be able to see beyond the obstacle instead of just saying, "Oh, well, I'm stuck and I'm done." The vision, I think in a metaphorical sense as well, is really being able, in a literal and a metaphorical sense, it's being able to see beyond the obstructions. So when it is unconscious and it's driving you and it's pulling you and you're going in that direction, you're going to hit an obstacle. You always will. And then you just you keep your eyes on the vision, and you know that you're going to figure it out. But if all of your attention went to the obstacle, now you're stuck in a problem you can't see beyond, which is the definition of being stuck.
So vision is going to work like brushing our teeth.
Well, in a sense, in the way that I explained, yeah. I mean,
No need to have a vision board.
No need to have a vision board. If you know that you want clean teeth and you know the way to get there.
I do not have an image of a nice clean teeth on my wall.
Well, try making an image of yourself right now of teeth that are rotting and dirty and falling out of your mouth.
Nasty.
Yeah, so that'll probably still motivate you in the opposite direction.
So it's a neat idea. It makes a lot of sense. What is someone going to do if they want to intentionally make their vision unconscious? What do they do?
Well, you can't really intentionally do that, because as soon as you put your intention on it, then it keeps it conscious, right? It's like saying, don't think about the color blue. It's like you're going to think about it. So what I tell people is, tweak your vision until it's extremely compelling, and make sure that you see yourself in the vision as well. So make it so compelling that it feels like it wants to suck you in. And that's what a lot of people do. And this is where the whole Neville Goddard thing, I completely disagree with. They say, well, like, step into it and imagine it's already happened and you're already doing it. It's like, that's just a good way of deluding you into feeling like you've already gotten something that you don't have. Therefore, you won't be motivated to do it. And that's not what you want to do. You want to see yourself in your vision doing the things that you envision. And that will be very motivating. Tweak it, adjust it, and this might take a few days. You can go back and revisit it the next day, the day after that, the day after that. And then you get it to a point where it's extremely compelling and it's not going to get any more compelling, and then let it go. Don't keep practicing it, because that's what a lot of people do. When I talk about creating a vision, they were like, well, should I practice this every day? And it's like, absolutely not. If you keep practicing it every day, then it's right in front of your face. And then you're going to start to you could get bored with it, and you could start saying, oh, it's not giving me what I want, so screw this. And then you get upset or you feel resentful. Nope, just let it go. And it'll be amazing when you finally realize one day when you step into it, and it's like, oh, wow, that's actually happening now. And so you want it to guide you and let it take its natural progression. And that usually happens when it's unconscious.
Do you mind if
So Go ahead, Nate.
Do you mind if we go back just a little bit, because you mentioned a couple things that I've noticed a lot in the personal development industry. So you have someone, you mentioned visualizing yourself in the image or in the movie, right? A lot of people have been taught to step into it, and then you have and with the assumption that creates a result of some kind. And your experience is that when someone associates into it and doesn't disassociate themselves out of it and see themselves, then they tend to feel like they've already accomplished it. And what does that impact have? What happens?
It just takes away your motivation. If you've already done it, then why would you be motivated to do it? And there are people who really are invested in that framework, and they get to the point where they're living in a fantasy world, and their fantasies are sort of narcotic. and it inebriates them from realizing and connecting with reality and admitting that, wait a minute, no, I don't have this. And they're so invested in keeping their vibration up, and so by thinking, like, by acknowledging the truth and the reality that no, you're not a millionaire, and no, you're not a supermodel, or any of these things, they're so afraid of, like, well, that's going to lower my vibration. It's like, no, that you're just accepting reality. And you have to accept where you are not, so that you can get to where you want to go. And I've had these arguments with people all the time. They're like, well, I did this and I did that. One person came at me a lot saying, I'm an expert guitar player. There's no way for me to verify that. He was commenting on one of my YouTube videos. And he said, and the way that I became that was I assumed it was already true. And I said, okay, well, I can tell you right now, that's not true. And he said, well, prove it. And I said, well, if you assumed you were already an expert guitar player, you wouldn't be practicing, stuff that only a novice would practice, stuff that a novice has to practice in order to become eventually an expert guitar player. You would have just jumped to the expert stuff. Did you not start with the basics? And he was like, well, yeah, I had to start with the basics. And I was like, well, okay, then you had to admit at some point, I'm not an expert guitar player and I have to start at the beginning. So, but if you inebriate yourself into your fantasies and you're thinking, oh, I'm already there, then there would be no point in actually practicing. There would be no point in starting from the beginning, because you already give yourself the sense that you're there already.
So we have the first step. We know what we value. We know how to fulfill them. And then we've made a vision out of that.
Mhm.
What's the next sign?
This is the one that you were talking about, and that is checking in. Is there any resistance to fulfilling that vision, accomplishing that goal? And if so, what is it? And this is not what most people do. Is they don't address the resistance that they feel toward something that they want, again, because they think it lowers their vibration or something like that, or they think it's going to get in the way. And it's like, yes, it will get in the way if you don't address it. So what most people do is they'll just suppress it and then pretend like it's not there. And if you do that, what'll probably happen, just like a vision becomes unconscious, the resistance becomes unconscious, which means now it has more control over you and will limit you more because you're not even aware of it. So you want to look at your vision. The way I like to do it is I like to see my vision, and I like to see my goal as kind of a stepping stone to the vision, but my focus is on the vision. And I am willing to throw that goal out if I find that it's not leading me toward that fulfillment, if it's not leading me toward that vision. So that's how I started off. And then I look at all that and I say to myself, is there any part of me that it's objecting to making this vision a reality? And this is the time to be honest with yourself, because if you're not honest with yourself, you're only going to hurt yourself. Now, when you know the purpose of this, you can relax and realize that this is an important step to do, and it's okay to acknowledge resistance, because what resistance is, there's no part of you that doesn't want you to be happy. There's no part of you that doesn't want you to be fulfilled. There's no part that is trying to sabotage you being a happy and fulfilled person. It's just not true. And there is no such thing as fear of success. I assure you. I will prove it. I can show anybody who wants to argue that one. I'll do that with you. So what your resistance is a part of you that has been isolated from the rest of you that has a positive intention. And typically its strategy for for trying to fulfill its positive intention is an avoidant strategy. And so it's working, it feels like it's working against you. And so the whole point of acknowledging resistance is to find out what is its positive intention, which is a value. The resistance is actually trying to fulfill a value for you. And it was your instructions that you gave to this part of you to do that. And a good one is, you're in school, grade school or whatever, something happens and you get really embarrassed. All your friends laugh at you, or all the, classmates laugh at you. And then what do? You go, okay, don't ever let that happen to me again. That was painful. And so you're telling this part of you to make sure that, that never happens again. You don't think of it as a part, but you just tell yourself that.
Right.
And so that part gets the message and says, okay, we got to make sure we avoid that ever happening again. And then you forget about it. It goes unconscious. And then so other parts of you start to emerge and you go, hey, yeah, I want to go say hi to that attractive stranger, or I want to get up on a stage and teach something or talk about something, or I want to start a YouTube channel. And then you feel all this resistance to doing that, and you don't know why. And this would be why. There's that part of you that you gave instructions to make sure that you never got embarrassed again. And you have to get in touch with that part and say, okay, if you don't want me to be embarrassed, what do you want from me instead? And maybe it says, I want you to be accepted. Great. That's a wonderful value. And then you might even want to take a little bit further and say, well, what's important about acceptance? And it's like, maybe I feel empowered. Okay, great. And then you go to the part that wants to fulfill the vision and you say, okay, does empowerment work with my vision? Of course it will. And just adding some empowerment will work very well for your vision. What often happens too is when you elicit the values from the resistance, often you'll find the same values that are in your vision. So like love and happiness, like you often will find that in the resistance. So you got to realize you're one human being and it feels like you're being pulled apart or it feels like one part of you is fighting against you, but it's like, wait a minute, we want the same thing and we're all in the same skin. Why don't we work together on this and help each other fulfill this? So what I tell people is to take those values and add them to their vision. And if it so happens that you have the same values in your resistance as your vision already, they often offer a additional dimension or layer to that value that wasn't originally in your original vision. And so you want to add that additional layer or dimension to it.
I think the example was very useful for people to understand how it plays out in real life. And also this idea that, you may find out that your resistance actually wants exactly the same thing. It's just that it's trying to protect you.
We're one whole human being, each one of us. And so it's there, we can integrate these parts of us. And you could probably say that almost all resistance, all psychological problems, all issues of like feeling worthy and self-esteem, all comes down to integrating. The more you integrate yourself, the happier, more fulfilled you're going to be, the more whole you're going to feel. And I've taken this kind of to an extreme, and I don't think this is right for everybody. But I had my chiropractor was asking me about the trip that we went on just recently, and I was telling him all the countries we had gone to, and including the Republic of Florida, and and he was like, you can really do all that, like you can go and travel and get work done. And I said, as long as I have a laptop and a camera, or maybe even just my phone, I can kind of do without my camera even. Yeah, I can go anywhere. And he was like, man, that's amazing. And I said, yeah. And it was very purposeful for me to want to integrate my personal life with my work life. Like I never felt, I understand why people separate the two. There's like, that's my professional life and this is my personal life. And it makes sense for a lot of people. But I was like, I don't want to live like that. I want to live where the two are almost the same thing. They're different things, but I want to merge them. I don't want to feel like I have to like shift who I am or shift my identity when I step into a professional role. It feels kind of fake to me. And I'm not calling out people for being fake. I know that you have to put on a professional face at certain times and around certain people. And I don't think that makes you fake necessarily, but I didn't like the way that it made me feel. So I like to feel like no matter what area I step into my life, I get to be authentic and I get to be who I want to be. And so I, as much as possible, have integrated my work and my personal life. I mean, my personal development became my professional career. And so, and again, that's not for everybody. But in general, we always want to move toward integration. So when you feel resistance or you feel some sort of objection, the last thing you want to do is try to push that away or ostracize it or label it like there's a part of me that's trying to sabotage me, or there's a part of me that doesn't want me to be successful, or I'm afraid of success. It's all nonsense. It's a part of you, and all parts of you are valid. So it's a matter of integrating it, and how you integrate it is by connecting with its core intention, its value. What is it trying to do for you? All parts of you are trying to do something for you. And when you can get to that level of the value, you'll see that it will integrate with your other values. That's one of the beautiful things about values. And there's so many possibilities in a value. Did we cover that well enough?
I think so, for sure.
All right, moving on. So what do we do next? We got 3 signs. Now we have a 4th sign. And the 4th sign is where the rabbit hole goes really deep. And this is what we specialize in at self-concept, and that is taking your values and transforming them into qualities of who you are. Now, so much of NLP in the beginning, in the early days, was focused on states and resources. And so you have a present state, and that's the state of lack because I want something I don't have. Then you have the desired state, and that's how I'm going to feel when I have what I want. And what is the only thing separating me from my present state and my desired state? Well, it's resources, internal resources. That's classic NLP. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think what NLP was tapping into in the early days, which I don't think anyone else was doing, or any of the other modalities of personal development, is that it's not the object or the accomplishment that gives us fulfillment, desired state. It's the value that we're projecting onto it. When we fulfill that value, then we feel fulfilled. And if that weren't true, then we would all value all the same things to the same degree. Like a brand new sports car, everyone would want one. And it's like, we know that's not true. So what does that tell us? That we're projecting the value onto it. So you're only a resource or two or three away from being in your desired state. The problem I have with states is that they're not very stable. They don't stick around. They come and go. And you have anchoring, which is a very popular technique in NLP. And I've gotten to the point where I've kind of abandoned anchoring because you can anchor it and you can a state and you can feel it for a few minutes, and then it just really seems to dissipate. So what about taking it to the level of a quality about who you are, an actual aspect of who you are? So it's not just I'm striving to be happy and I'm wanting to fulfill happiness in my life. It's now I'm a happy person. And if you look at all of your values that you elicit from a goal, and you go down the list and you say, okay, I'm going to be real honest with myself. And am I each one of these qualities in a certain and solid way? Am I a happy person? Am I an authentic person? Am I at peace? Am I joyful? Am I passionate? And chances are, if you're doing this for the first time, you're going to realize that you're not. So what happens when you have a value, but you don't believe you are that value as a quality of who you are? Your self-esteem is lower. Your confidence is lower. And especially if it's an ambiguous quality where you go, sometimes I feel like I am and sometimes I feel like I'm not. That feels very unstable and lacks certainty. But say like the value of success. What if instead of striving for success, you believed you are a successful person, and you're basing that on actual examples that have happened in your life? Then it's not a matter of like I'm chasing the carrot. Now it's, well, I am that. So because I am that, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I naturally go after opportunities and take necessary risks to be successful. And you will see success and opportunities to be successful much, much more if you actually embody that value as a quality. This is not fake it till you make it either. This is what most people think, oh, so I should just assume I'm successful and fake being successful until I actually become successful. No, absolutely not. There's no such thing as like fake confidence or fake success ever turning into real confidence or real success. One is fake and one is not. So it's not going to happen. Fake gold is not going to turn into real gold. So how you do that is not something we can cover in a podcast. That is the essence of the training that we teach, is how to take qualities that you value and transform them into certain and solid qualities of who you are. And we base that on real examples, real experiences that have happened in your life. And that's a long process to explain, and it has to be practiced. So we're not going to go into that here. But if you just imagine that, if you look at all your values, all your highest values, and imagine if you embodied all of those values as qualities of who you are that you felt absolutely certain about, is there anything that would stop you? Is there anything that you couldn't accomplish that you wanted to accomplish? No, because what happens is you feel your self-esteem goes way up, your confidence goes way up. You also can take feedback much better. Failure doesn't stop you. It's just temporary. It's just feedback. And so you just get really curious. I remember when I did this, I sat and transformed all of these values into qualities. It took me a few weeks. And I just remember kind of like opening up my eyes and thinking to myself, it completely changes the game. It completely flips it on its head. It's like, now I have nothing to lose.
Right.
And that has always been true. I don't have anything to lose. I'm still going to be me. I'm still going to embody these qualities. I am who I value. So there's nothing to lose. I can go, and take risks that I need to take. And of course, you can lose things like money and things like that. But so you want to be cautious. It's not like you want to just rush into these things and be stupid about it. That's not how this works. And at the same time, you realize that even if bad things do happen, that we can recover and we can be resilient. And that's another quality and another value, being resilient.
So do not scare people away, because this step is definitely huge and it requires a lot of work, and you cannot necessarily achieve it in like a 15-minute write down journal. But I would like to point out that all of the signs that we've mentioned so far, they are extremely useful. And that's something that you do not need very much knowledge. You do not need hours and hours to work on it. You can achieve those fairly easily, would you say?
Mhm.
And so I would say that you can still use all of this information and make 2024 the best year ever. You do not necessarily have to accomplish every single point that we mentioned here in order to achieve it. If you start and you go through them up until the vision, you are already much better off than having you not done any of those.
Yeah. And just remember though, when you embody those values, your highest values as qualities of who you are, that's the game changer. Like that's when
You take it to the very, very
your
next level.
reality, it will literally seem like your reality has changed. Like that's how extreme this is, because what we're talking about is changing beliefs about who you are, your identity, which is the biggest belief you have. It's the biggest concept you carry around. It transcends time and space. So when you start transforming things at that identity level, it has wide-reaching effects over your entire life. It's also why you want to be careful about doing it, because it can really change things in ways that you had no idea it would change.
It kind of sets a self-corrective feedback loop. So when you think about what Damon was saying earlier, and he was talking about making your values your focus. Now, when you become your values, you're going to instinctively correct actions. You're going to maneuver things around in your life in order to express them, because that's just who you are, right? And if there's been anything uh, uh, anytime in the past where you know that you can do something, you know it's possible, but you don't feel like you're the type of person that can, this changes that. And I think that that's a very special thing about this technology.
Absolutely. The fifth sign, and this plays in very well with the last thing that we talked about, because I think where people get really rigid about accomplishing what it is that they want, it comes from a deep-rooted fear that that they might be unworthy, or they might be maybe not be good enough. So, as you go forward in 2024, you want to be open and curious about how this is all going to play out. Not this is how it has to happen. Like this is what I need to accomplish and this is how it has to happen. Like I functioned like that for years. Not only did it make me miserable, I rarely accomplished what I was trying to accomplish. But I also know that that came from a deep-rooted fear of being insignificant. I had low self-esteem. I wasn't confident about these things. And so there's this feeling of I have to accomplish this, because if I don't, I'm not worthy. I'm undeserving. Or, whatever stupid self-talk we tell ourselves that's very negative, that makes us feel less than and inferior. And so when you're clinging to a goal like that, and you're going to get very rigid, and that rigidity is actually going to limit you even further, and it's going to make it even more difficult for you to accomplish what it is that you want. So by remaining open and curious about how it's all going to happen, I mean, you want to plan. You don't want to just say, oh, I wonder where my plan is going to come from. No, you want to plan, but you want to be open to adjusting that plan and adjusting your strategy. And when you fully embody your qualities that you value, that fear goes away, because you don't feel less than. You are what you value. So there's no losing value, there's no losing worthiness or any of those things. That's whole self-worth thing burns out. And so now it's just about, well, I'm curious and I'm open to how is this actually going to play itself out? How is this vision going to be realized? And so there's a kind of like a childlike playfulness that is comes about as a mindset from being open and curious, and that is so important. It's something we lose if you watch kids play, and uh, kids never set a goal to learn how to speak their native language. They never set a goal to walk. They just naturally do these things. They just naturally progress, and there's a sort of a curiosity and openness that helps them do that. And so we want to have that same approach. And then of course we don't want to. I've seen people really focus on the whole childlike thing to the extent that they don't allow their adult wisdom to come in. So we don't want to do that either. We want to allow that piece there as well. But I can't emphasize enough that when you don't have those insecurities anymore, when you don't have low self-esteem anymore, when you that whole self-worth thing, you see it for what it is, there's no such thing. You tend to be more naturally open and curious about how things are going to play out because your self-worth is not on the line here. That's not what's at stake, because there is no such thing, and you fully embody that. It's not like you just tell yourself that. It's like you fully embody it.
I'm gonna add here something you say very often. Commit to your values and not necessarily to goals, to certain activities, to a certain vision that has to be identical. Commit to your values and then stay open and curious and see how they will play out. In the end, what you want is to be fulfilled. You want to fulfill those values. So you may discover even different ways of fulfilling those values.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, would you rather be a multi-billionaire and absolutely miserable to the point of being depressed and suicidal? Or would you rather live a much simpler life? You have everything that you need. You have the money you need. You're not in debt. You can pay your bills. You have a roof over your head, and you're extremely fulfilled. I'll take the fulfillment any day, because I mean, that is the experience that we're after. If billions of dollars doesn't give you any fulfillment, then it's like, what's the point? So yeah, commit to your values, because those are the focuses that will bring you fulfillment. Whereas achieving a goal, sometimes it'll be fulfilling and sometimes it won't. And again, the times when it is fulfilling, it's because it's fulfilling your values. Like there's
Right.
no way of getting around that. But I mean, I'm sure everybody listening has had the experience of achieving something, achieving a goal, and then you just go, huh, man, that wasn't really what I thought it was going to be. It didn't make me feel, better. And that's another thing too. A lot of people are chasing self-worth. And if you're chasing self-worth, that also is usually rooted in a fear of that you lack self-worth. And so if you fail at something, most people, their biggest fear about failure is not so much the failure itself, but it's what do they think it will mean about them?
Right.
And they think it will mean that they're of less value or they're unworthy. And so that's why people don't even try to succeed, or they don't go after the goal. They're waiting. They're waiting to feel something, or I don't know what they're waiting for. But I mean, I spend a lot of time waiting in that same way, and with the fear of, well, if I try and I fail, then I'm of less value. But when you transform your values into qualities of who you are, that's never an issue. That's never a possibility. So you can fail, and then it will be frustrating when you fail, like it always is. But it's so much easier to fail when that piece of self-worth, that whole thing, is not a factor.
Right.
Then it's just a matter of getting back up on my feet and going after it again.
And that's really what learning is, right? When you were mentioning how kids will go around this curious path, it's just before they had the beliefs that they couldn't, right?
Or the
So
belief that if they're bad if they don't
right,
achieve it. As long when that gets introduced, having kids myself and being around kids, you see it changes their behavior. When being a bad kid is at stake by their actions, it changes what they do.
sure. Or if not having the spouse that they wanted means that they're unlovable, or not having the financial rewards means they're unsuccessful. Those kinds of things. And when you flip it, like you were mentioning earlier, when you become unlovable, or you become unlovable first, become successful first, you tend to gravitate towards the right choices.
Absolutely. All right. I hope this has been useful for everyone. And if it has, please comment below how this has been useful to you. I guarantee you, if you have all of these 5 things showing up in your life right now, beginning of 2024, 2024 is going to be an amazing year. And if you're not quite there, hopefully this has helped you get closer to that. And then, of course, we have training programs and one-on-one coaching and all of that to help you get there. And so why not kick this year off the best year making it the best year you possibly can by doing the work that we're talking about here to make sure that it happens.